Thank you for having me.
You were one of Donald Trump's most consistent and vocal supporters. You called on people to vote for him. What happened?
Yes. What happened was the war with Iran, which I don't believe serves the interests of the United States. I think it's destructive to the United States and to the world, but mostly to the United States. I'm an American. That's what I care about. And that's something he promised he wouldn't do. For 10 years, he argued against a war like this. And then for a variety of reasons, not all of which I understand, he embarked on it. And so I can't support that. My views did not change. His did.
Do you generally believe Israel would try to harm you because of your opinion?
Do I believe Israel would try to harm me?
Yes.
I mean, of course, I don't know. I hope not. I don't want to be harmed.
Yeah.
But my main interest is not Israel.
I'm not just asking you. You were implied to that when you spoke about your coming to Israel. Let's see that for a second.
And I said to them, okay, I want to send you the flight information, and I want you to pass that on to the Israeli military just so, they don't mistake us for an Iranian drone or something. I mean, not to be paranoid, but again, this is probably the most violent country in the world, Israel.
That was Tucker Carlson, former MAGA Trump supporter, podcaster with a reach into the tens of millions of listeners every month. A populist who has been enormously successful by any measure, and who also courts controversy, and for good reason. The clip that you just watched is from an interview with top Israeli news anchor, Channel 13's Udi Segal, which aired earlier this week. That's what we get into today on State of Tel Aviv and Beyond. Why did Udi Segal choose to interview Tucker Carlson? And what transpired in that exchange? I've long been troubled by giving oxygen to people like Tucker Carlson, Piers Morgan, many others, people who frankly seem to get off on platforming extremists and fancy themselves free speech, intellectual truth seekers. Are they? So today we speak with Udi Segal. We talk about why he felt the interview was important to do, why it was necessary, what went well, less well, and if he could do it again, what he might ask. This is a very candid exchange about the calculation that every journalist must make when engaging with a complex figure like Tucker Carlson. I'm Vivian Berkovich, former Canadian ambassador to Israel. Let's do this. Okay, spontaneous kind of realization. State of Tel Aviv was launched almost exactly 4 years ago to the day, May 17th, 2022. We went live. And we went live with two pieces. The feature piece was by none other than Udi Segal. And it was about the alliance at the time between Yair Lapid and Naftali Bennett in an effort to replace the Netanyahu government. The story was called Brothers in Arms. We put the link into the show notes. And it was completely, totally unplanned, serendipitous that I circled back to Udi exactly 4 years later to do this podcast. So I didn't even realize that, Udi, if you're listening, when we did our interview, I thought that was a fun little thing to share at the top. And you can see, of course, as I'm sharing this little vignette with you, the cover image, a magnificent painting done by an Israeli artist who has since become a friend. And that artist is Yoram Gal. I'll also put his website link in the show notes. His work is just magnificent, and it's a wonderful story how I found him to do this painting for us. Okay, some brief housekeeping matters. The interview with Udi Segal and Tucker Carlson aired on Israel's Channel 13 on Tuesday, May 19th. I thought it was important right away, and I reached out to Udi shortly after. We recorded our discussion the following morning, Wednesday, May 20th. I had intended to drop this podcast on the following day, Thursday, but then stuff happened. Among many important things that happened was that on Thursday, Tucker devoted his show to the topic of Israel and Jewish control of America. I mean, he sort of couched it in far less overt terms, but that's what he was saying. That's what he's a master at doing. And he suggested strongly that Israel and the Jews also control the White House or exercise undue influence at best. That podcast was long, dense, and aired on Thursday, May 21st. And I just felt it was really important to study it carefully and include material from that. So that's when my podcast became longer, more intense, and here we go. Let's get to it. So wonderful to see you. It's been a while. Udi Segel, good morning.
Hi, Vivian. Good to see you too. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for making time to speak to me, speak to State of Tel Aviv and beyond listeners on something I think is a really, really interesting topic. Sure grabbed me. And aside from, this very busy life you have, father of 4 kids, we're just catching up on all that, the primary anchor of one of Israel's major news television shows, and a bunch of other stuff. We're here to talk today about an interview you did with Tucker Carlson. And I spent a lot of time yesterday watching it carefully. And I really want to talk to you about it because it's a fascinating exchange. We're going to put the link to the whole episode in the podcast, the show notes, so that anyone who wants to watch it in full can. Of course, it's in English. And for those of you who prefer Hebrew, there are Hebrew subtitles.
Great.
So, Udi, let's start with why. Why did you want to? Why did you think it was obviously important to interview Tucker Carlson?
The short answer, as journalist, I will tell you why not. Okay? So, because most of the reservation were why are you giving him a stage? Why are you giving him a voice?
Yeah.
And I will address it. But the question why, I think, is fundamentally is in my stomach and in my heart as an Israeli, to look straight forward to the things that are troubling us and are dangerous to my country and to my state. And I think that Tucker Carlson is a voice that is very, very important for Israeli to hear, because he is maybe the first one to say bluntly that we are losing the support in the last stronghold of support that Israel has in the United States. Tucker Carlson is like the heart and soul of the MAGA movement, of the pro-Trump people, that I think it's important to hear. And everyone was saying, don't give him a stage. He has a stage. He's reaching his podcast for 30, 40 million people a month. He doesn't need Channel 13 in Israel. But I think that we, Israeli, needs to hear is troubling and annoying and sometimes wrong and sometimes upsetting argument that he has against the state of Israel, even though he's a populist and he is blunt and he is annoying. And he is.
I tend to think that platforming people like Tucker Carlson, going on to shows like Piers Morgan's Uncensored, is ill-advised. Because each time we give them a platform, we give them oxygen, but more than that, we legitimize them. And I use we loosely. I'm not saying Udi Segel, as you say. The state of Israel and being on your channel is not going to make or break Tucker's career or influence. But it is more important in some ways because you are saying, just by speaking with him, this man is important, he has influence, and we need to understand what he's all about. Fair?
Yes. He's not alone with this attitude toward Israel. And the fact that he was catched lying and his credibility is low doesn't, I can use the same phrases on some political elect people. And this is not a reason not to interview them. And I think he has a voice that is influencing people inside the Republican Party.
The point that Udi Segel makes here is important. Tucker Carlson is a man with a podcast, and he clearly has his fans. Whether he really exercises influence over mainstream MAGAs, and to what degree, is unclear. For every opinion extolling his sway, there will be another one dismissing such a possibility. Having said that, A quick online search suggests that Carlson's popularity among right-wing Americans and Republicans has, I don't want to say nosedived, but plummeted in recent months, and in part because of his attacks on President Trump. It is not necessarily that his detractors all approve of Trump, but what seems to be clear is that people do not like disloyalty, especially when it is loud and bellicose. And that is the only way in which Tucker Carlson seems to express himself. He has also exposed himself as being someone who holds views that are sometimes bizarre. Among them, his defense of Russia's attack on Ukraine as being eminently justified and purely defensive in nature. We'll get to that a little bit later. Here, for now, we bring you an exchange between Udi Segal and Tucker Carlson that goes to the heart of Carlson's views and which he repeats often, that Israel is a terror state, that Israel has committed genocide and ethnic cleansing, and that Israel, with its wealthy donors, like Miriam Adelson, who he mentions explicitly and constantly, that Israel basically controls America. Have a listen.
You accuse Netanyahu of dragging Trump into an unnecessary war with Iran. So let's think about what it actually means. Do you really think that a foreign leader can pull the president of the United States into a war he didn't want? And what does it tell us about Trump? Is he really that weak?
Well, I don't think that could happen. I saw it happen. I was there. And so that happened. So the question is why? And I just want to be clear, I don't primarily blame the Israeli prime minister, who I think is wrong. I think he's gravely hurt Israel. I think he's leading Israel toward destruction. I think he's a very bad leader and a very unwise leader. However, I also believe that Prime Minister Netanyahu is acting in what he thinks is his nation's best interest. So I give him credit for that and always have. I don't blame him primarily. I blame Donald Trump for folding under the pressure from Benjamin Netanyahu and his many allies in the United States. Donors to Donald Trump, people in the media class here, were effectively working on behalf of the Israeli government, and Donald Trump, whose decision it was, caved under that pressure. But on February 28th, the United States followed Israel into this war. And the Secretary of State of the United States said, we had no choice. They chose the time. The Israeli prime minister decided when this started. Well, that's the definition of control. He had control of this war. And so my question is, why did Donald Trump allow a nation of 9 million people to pull the United States, a nation of 350 million people, into a war that will change its future and that is bad for the United States? And I can't answer that question.
You can't answer.
I don't have an answer.
What you're implying that Donald Trump is so weak that a foreign leader can drag him into a war he doesn't want. I think is exemplifying something that we need to understand, Israelis. Because we think, and this is exactly the lesson we need to learn from October 7th. Before October 7th, people said the same thing on Israel media. Why you show or don't show the fire balloons that Hamas was throwing into the fields where you lived right now, near the western Negev in Israel, right beside the border with Gaza. When you show it on television, it's give Hamas the legitimacy that is hurting us. Don't show it. And why do you show them bragging with their Toyota pickups when they like conquering Israel? You give them the oxygen, the same word that you used, Vivian, and legitimacy that they are really threatening us. And we didn't show it enough before October 7th, and then we were surprised. Well, it was not only our surprise, it was the intelligence, it was the military failure, it was the strategic failure, it was Benjamin Netanyahu's failure, big failure. He can't run away from it. But I think my lesson and our lesson as the media is to hear everyone, not because we like them I'm not thinking of myself, and even on my channel, I didn't think that in my interview with Tucker Carlson, I legitimize him. Before I started the interview, I told my audience, who is Tucker Carlson? I show him exactly in his full color. And in the interview itself, I didn't just listen to his lies. I tackled him a few times. I made him back off of his accusing of genocide, Israel genocide in Gaza. He said it differently, but we heard something that we're not hearing day to day about what people think about us in Israel. And about us is, I mean, about Israelis and about the state of Israel and about the government of Israel. But it's important because what we are getting from our leadership now is we're fine. We have Donald Trump on our side. We're doing great. Everyone's love us. We are at our highest in the United States. And when something will happen, and there are trends in the United States and in the Western world and in Europe and also in Canada, as you know better than me, that we need to hear, even if we don't like the sounds. And even if it's giving some legitimacy to Tucker Carlson. And I have to tell you, he's only a media guy that speaks sometimes baloney and speaks sometimes mixing facts with non-facts and with lies, but it's not that bad. I interviewed people that did far more bad things that he ever done. We are interviewing murderers. We're interviewing people that are corrupted. We're interviewing leaders that are against Israel. He's only a media guy.
Yeah. Okay. I'm convinced. I mean, I'm torn. And obviously, here I am, kind of, second degree interviewing you, the guy who interviewed him, right? So arguably, I'm doing exactly what I'm saying I'm not comfortable with, which is amplifying even more, second degree. But you point out really, really well, and thank you for that, the complexity of it. I agree with you. I think that we absolutely must know what's being said, what's going on. And as someone who has I've been in Israel now for over 12 years, and I come from Canada, from North America, I like to think I understand the kind of psychological culture and reality in both places reasonably well. But I don't think that there is a good understanding here of that kind of anti-Semitism with a smile, the very polite anti-Semitism. And Tucker's very smooth, he's built a career. He's a smooth talker. He's just not that disciplined, in my view, in his delivery. And he's rarely challenged because he always controls his platform. So let's focus on a few issues that I think are really important. But overall, let me ask you this. What did you want to accomplish in that interview? You wanted to show Israelis what is being said by someone influential in the media, right? You wanted them to really hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Do you feel it was an effective, successful interview? When you finished it, what did you think?
I thought that even what we're doing now is part of the success. The success is to talk about it. He's not saying, well, Tucker was right. Let's hooray. No, it was, okay, we heard him. Let's ask ourselves, do we have good answer to his question? The answer is yes. But it's not my position as a journalist that interview people to give them answers. I'm not political elect. I'm not an official elect. I'm not the Prime Minister of Israel. I can suggest my own view, and I take them with a grain of salt, or even mine. Okay, I don't know everything. And he, of course, doesn't know. And I think sometimes when he knows it is manipulating view. And I thought that the fact that I was asking him a question and made him sometimes sweat a little bit, and a little bit, I don't know, kind of defensive, this was part of the success. But the main success was that people are speaking about it and asking themselves, who is Tucker Carlson? Who is he stands for? What is his voice meaning?
I want to pause here to reinforce the point that Udi Segal is making, that the value in platforming Tucker Carlson is reflected in the discussion that the show generates. It is important for us to self-reflect and question, harshly and candidly. On Wednesday, the day after the interview with Udi Segal and Tucker Carlson aired on Channel 13, the White House issued a statement, which was kind of unusual. It accused Tucker Carlson of spreading fake news when he said that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had dragged the U.S. into the war with Iran. And then the note continued, and I quote, Long before he was elected, President Trump has been consistent in his belief that Iran can never be allowed to possess a nuclear weapon. Israel has always been a great ally to the United States, especially through Operation Midnight Hammer and Operation Epic Fury, that obliterated Iran's nuclear facilities and destroyed their defense industrial base. President Trump took bold, decisive action to protect the American people, something presidents have talked about for 47 years, but only this president has had the courage to address. Closed quote. It is extraordinary for a White House administration to make such a pointed comment with respect to a media event, if I can call it that. But not unprecedented for this president, but nevertheless, not an everyday occurrence. What so many of us are trying to figure out is whether Tucker carries any truck with a significant number of people, or if his credibility is cratered, or something in between. But we're not going to sort that out here today. I do, however, have to linger on the day after the E27 Tucker Carlson interview just a touch longer. There was a 7-time Republican congressional representative, Thomas Massie of Kentucky, who lost a vote on Wednesday night. Massie and Carlson take the position that he was beaten by a cabal of Jews. They don't use the word cabal, but that's what they're saying. The AIPAC lobby, the Republican Jewish Coalition, Miriam Adelson, and another billionaire who is Jewish, Paul Singer. Massie says it is clear that they were determined to take him down. Tucker said they were determined to take him down to make the point that they, the Jews, control America. Israel controls America. They are corrupt. They are the definition of corruption because they carry on as if rules do not apply to them. And they are willing to do whatever it takes to bring down an American patriot and congressman who does not support Israel. Again, in his soliloquy, Tucker refers to Adelson, Singer, and Israel repeatedly. He's obsessed with Miriam Adelson. Throughout this interview and others, Carlson states that Adelson is Israeli, she's actually dual Israeli-American, and that she is loyal to a foreign country, Israel. He alleges that they will do whatever it takes to win, whatever it takes. And when he says win, he means to ensure that the interests of Israel prevail over America's in the White House. This is exactly why E27 interviewed Tucker Carlson, so that Israelis would at least be aware of who he is and what he has to say. And I'm betting that you, dear listeners, have not heard much of Tucker. Frankly, I don't make a point of immersing myself in his podcast rants either. So I've decided to play for you a 4-minute clip. It's kind of hard to believe that tens of millions of Americans hang on to this guy's every word. But rest assured, I'm sparing you a lot of anguish because I've listened to hours of him. You just do 4 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring you Tucker Carlson.
But maybe the most obvious example of what's going on happened last night. And it wasn't just the fact that Ed Galreen, or whatever the guy's name is, who even knows, who cares? As he won, somebody, and this was cruel, brought a video camera to his, quote, victory party. Now, remember, this is a guy who just beat a 7-term incumbent. And check the numbers on this. It's not that easy to beat an incumbent, a 7-term incumbent who is wildly popular, even by the standards of Republican states. Thomas Massie wasn't just popular, he was wildly popular in his district, and the election results over the past 7 terms prove that. Look him up. So this guy, Ed, whatever his name is, just wins, and his one campaign promise is to draft your son and send him to Iran, but he wins anyway. How did he win? Well, obviously people were just so thrilled by the idea of a draft that they just lifted Ed Galreen onto their shoulders and carried him across the finish line. And then they all streamed into the victory hall for beers and high fives and maybe some brats. You imagine that must have happened. People woke up one morning and realized
Their congressman, who we thought was honest and principled and decent, a family man whose 4 children love him, who built his own home, who's the embodiment of the America you thought you lived in, this independent and has self-respect and reverence for God and nature. That's what you thought of him. And you realize, no, he's like a liberal who's actually being supported by the jihadis, who's like some kind of sex criminal, because that's what they told you. We need Ed Galroon, the draft guy. And we're thrilled he got it. Well, let's take a look. Let's take a peek at what Election HQ last night at Ed's victory party actually looked like. Covered a lot of victory parties in my life, a lot, more than 10, and some lost parties too. That's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. There's no one there. What percentage of the people in that room know Ed Galroon or are related to him? Are his neighbors were paid to be there? We don't know the answer. There's nobody there. So how'd this guy win? Well, he won on mail-in ballots. And we'll sort of leave it to online sleuths to determine whether that's legitimate or not. Who knows? Because if you're willing to pour tens of millions of dollars into a Republican primary in the 4th District of Kentucky, you're probably willing to do whatever it takes. And maybe they did. We don't know that. Not alleging it. But we do know that's not what democracy looks like. Democracy is the process by which people express their will, by which they say, this is how we want our country to be run because it's our country. It doesn't belong to Miriam Adelson or Paul Singer or Israel or Big Pharma for that matter, or any other small group of rich people. It's not the plaything of billionaires. That doesn't belong to the oligarchs. It belongs to us. And here's what we want. And you can't ignore us because we're the owners here. And this is a shareholders meeting and we're voting. And when people win in a race like this, there's evidence of it. And that evidence takes very familiar forms. Enthusiasm, joy, and just sheer numbers. Like people show up. They can't believe it. We beat the evil Thomas Massey with his jihadi backers. This is a blow against Islamic Jihad, whatever that is. Islamic Jihad, which along with Hamas is one of the big problems in the 4th District of Kentucky. They've been very, very concerned about Islamic Jihad and Hamas and Hezbollah for a long time in Covington. But anyway, there was no such display. And so it makes you wonder, this election itself, was it another part of the humiliation ritual? Was it a way of saying to the rest of us, people who sort of believed in democracy, it's all fake? We can get a guy whose last name we can't pronounce elected on a platform everybody in America hates because we can, because we're billionaires and you're not. And of course our priorities are not aligned with yours. In fact, we hate your priorities and we hate you. We're going to do this to you anyway. Even in Kentucky, we can do it. It's possible that's the message they were sending. Pretty certain, actually.
Okay, now back to Udi Sego.
And I'll tell you what is my main conclusion from the interview. And this is the most thing that is interfering in me and bother me. I think he has something that speaks to a lot of Americans, also Democrats and left-wingers that hate Israel from the wrong reason, and also the right-wingers that also hate us from the wrong reason from the other side. And this thing that he said also in the interview is why we should pay for it. And why do we have any interest in Israel? And the fact that Israel as a state became a liability rather than an asset to Americans, this is something that we need to tackle. We need to explain to ourselves. We need to convince Americans. He said, why do we pay for it? And I told him, maybe it's the other way rather than you describe it. Maybe the United States is using Israel as the front base inside the Middle East in order to
Yes.
their interest and to get their controlling the energy market in the world. And they're using Israeli soldiers and Israeli planes that are American and were paid by the United States and Israel in order to do what's best for America in the views of the people that are running America, which is not Tucker Carlson, but J.D. Vance and Donald Trump that he supported once and now he doesn't.
So, I mean, let's stick with this point for a moment. The fact that Tucker Carlson saying, Israel, like, I wish you well, but you're not my problem. I shouldn't have to pay for you. I shouldn't have to be involved in your wars. I should not be drawn into conflicts or anything that is really kind of focused on your national interest and has nothing to do with America's. I'm American. I love America. America first. That's his thing. It's a very deeply entrenched thing in American society and political culture. World War I, World War II. America held out until almost the very end in both wars. Why? For the same reasons Tucker Carlson's saying. We're isolated. We're Fortress America. We've got all these oceans. It's not our problem. And then in the post-war era, this kind of recognition, understanding of the fact that, well, actually it is your problem because you're a superpower. You wield tremendous influence. And if you don't deal with it over there, it's going to impact your allies. You are not isolated. You are part of a global system. And that sensibility seemed to kind of prevail on both sides of the house in America and in the general populace. And we are seeing this kind of retreat back to American isolationism, America first. And what you're pinpointing, in my view, is the issue that somehow all of this, the backlash, is just being completely focused on the Jews and Israel. So one of the questions I would have loved to have asked Tucker, and that I really wanted you to ask, and you didn't, is what about Qatar? He was over in Qatar a few months ago, flown over to interview the Prime Minister on stage of a very carefully curated audience, a Doha Forum audience of 5,000. They're journalists, it's former, diplomats, all kinds of people. But Tucker was the star of the show. He was center stage with the Prime Minister, and he just fawned over him, raving about what a beautiful, fantastic place Qatar is. I love it so much, I'm going to buy a house here. It's so beautiful. You are such peace-loving, wonderful people. In the meantime, he's addressing a room full of a real variety of people. The room in which Tucker took center stage in Doha was packed with all manner of important people from all over the world. Top American officials from the Biden regime, former Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif, and others. On Sunday, December 6th, the world woke up to saturation media coverage of the Doha conference. It kicked off that morning. 5,000 people, high-profile people, had converged on Doha for 2 days from all over the world, many prominent journalists among them. One of the attendees is a former Obama and Biden diplomat who attempted to defend his attendance at this really quite controversial gathering by asserting that by being there, he could somehow foster dialogue with the heavily pro-Hamas crowd. Okay, whatever. Now, we'll show you a short clip from Tucker's appearance at the Doha conference. The link to his full appearance is in the show notes.
So last question. I've been personally, not to make it about me, but I have been criticized as being a tool of Qatar. And I just want to say what you already know, which is I've never taken anything from your country and don't plan to. I am, however, tomorrow buying a place in Qatar, both because I am
pay a high check
in Doha, yeah, and I'm doing that because I like the city. I think it's beautiful, but also to make the statement that I'm an American and a free man, and I'll be wherever I want to be, which I think is important. But that does kind of leave us in a place where I have not taken any money from Qatar. I have instead given money to Qatar. And I wonder if you feel that that means I've bought you and you will now spew my propaganda.
Well, thank you. Just ask me whatever you want me to do for you, I will do it. But look, Tucker, unfortunately, as I told you, that there are a lot of players putting a lot of efforts to sabotage the relationship between Qatar and the United States and to try to demonize anyone who will come to this country. Our efforts when we are lobbying or doing, our outreach in the United States, is to make sure that this relationship is safeguarded. And the relationship for us is mutually beneficial. We are not getting aid from United States. Instead, we are buying from United States. We are partnering with them. We are investing in the United States investing in Qatar. And this relationship has been always a two-way relationship. And we pay all these amounts for lobbying only to protect and to safeguard this relationship. If we were not being attacked and under a lot of disinformation campaign that's been unfortunately funded by other players who doesn't want to see a US-Qatar relationship flourish, we would spend this money for better things, to do with the relationship.
Sheikh Mohammed, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I appreciate it.
Note the coded language, which is used throughout the interview and quite typical of the type of language that Tucker Carlson deploys and employs. You can watch the full 20 minutes. The link is in the show notes. But the Qatari Prime Minister refers to, quote, lots of players trying to demonize Qatar, close quote. Innocent, well-meaning Qatar, the same Qatar that has financed Muslim Brotherhood activities around the world, that props up the Houthis and Hamas and Hezbollah financially and diplomatically, that has given oodles of money to the top American universities. And we see that some of the academic transformations that have occurred on campuses over previous decades may actually be influenced by these donations. Qatar, we are to believe, is the embodiment of the highest principles of humanity and decency, and pure as the driven snow. Now, back to E27. Islamists and terrorists. We have the elite of the Iranian diplomatic corps there, so many others. And Tucker commanded that stage. That was a big moment for him. So, long kind of wind up, but why didn't you ask him about Qatar? He's sitting there slamming Israel, saying, America's supporting Israel, America's throwing its money at Israel, blah, 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 blah. Israel, Israel, Israel. What about Qatar? Largest United States military base in the Middle East is in Qatar. And it's there for one purpose. It's to give America, to give America a kind of forward base in the Middle East and to defend Qatar, which we've seen over the last few years. So you clearly chose not to ask him about Qatar. Why?
No, I think you're right. I think I should have asked him about Qatar. It was, I had 45 minutes, which is a long time, and I asked him for a lot of things. And it was on my list, but time is running out. And I have to tell you, there's a special sport that I have also with myself, what I didn't ask. So this is
there you go.
This is the first 10. But maybe I will ask you, what would you have asked him about Qatar? Because every time you ask Tucker Carlson a question, you're
right.
going into 5 to 6 minutes that you need to debate about it. Because what you would have asked him? Why is he an hypocrite? Why is okay.
No, I wouldn't have asked him in a judgmental way. I would have said something like this. Now that you've invited me to ask the question, I hear your criticism of Israel, and it's based on fundamentally America first. This is not our war. Retreat. I would have said something to the effect that it's very much an isolationist kind of ideology and approach. Fine. That's been around for a long time. But you seem to be applying this approach selectively. And let me give you one example. Qatar. You appeared recently in Qatar. You held center stage. You had an audience with the Prime Minister before 5,000 people from around the world who are influential. And you did not utter the slightest critique or criticism of anything with respect to Qatar. Qatar hosts this military base. You didn't challenge that. America pours a lot of money into that military base. you didn't challenge that. Qatar is a country of something like 300,000 citizens and a few million guests. And these guests have no rights, legally, civically, in any way. Qatar is the main financier and diplomatic and other support for Hamas, which you say you don't like, Hezbollah, which you say you don't like, and the Houthis, which you say you don't like. But Qatar, in conjunction with Iran, is the head of the snake. On what basis do you give them such a free pass? Okay, so that was a long question, but I'll
tell you why. Because you watched the full video of the 45 minutes, you probably watched that I tackled him about even a worse example than Qatar, which is Putin and Russia.
Yes.
Okay.
I wanted to get to that.
I did tackle him about his double standard. But it was, and this was because he can say, Qatar didn't assassinate anyone. Qatar haven't been in war. He has, I understand his methods, and his methods are a populist, demagogic way of turning things around. So even though I haven't always succeeded in tackling him on the point, I did that with is supportive of Vladimir Putin, and the fact that he's said nothing about the tens of thousands of victims in the Ukraine-Russia war. And he said, of course, some kind of balonies that he was afraid, Putin, that Ukraine will be part of NATO and it will be a nuclear on its border. Yeah. We know it's nonsense. Okay.
So I'm glad you raised that, Udi, because I want to just pause now and I want to show that clip and just tell our listeners what they're about to see. This is when you took on Tucker very effectively, and you were kind of, going at what you said was his double standard. You're kind of constantly jumping on Israel, but hey, what about Putin? You called him a friend. You said, I didn't call him a friend. I don't know. I don't care. But he said that war was justified. Why was it justified? As you just indicated, because Kamala Harris and Biden had spoken with Zelensky. They had said, we're going to bring you into the bear hug. We want you in NATO. You're going to come into NATO. And that freaked Putin out, right? And Putin realized, oh my gosh, there's going to be nuclear weapons on my border. Therefore, it was justified as a defensive war for Russia to invade Ukraine. Now, not only is that totally fallacious, because it would take a long time for nukes, it does not justify anything, and it also does not address the 2014 invasion by Russia of Crimea. So let's just pause now and show that clip. Great clip.
So Ukraine as a nation is over. Yes, I've talked a lot about it, and I'm very upset about it.
But you have praised Putin.
I'm always upset about it.
You called Vladimir Putin your friend, and you think he's a great man, even though he invaded.
I didn't call him my friend.
He invaded
what
Ukraine
are you talking about?
with no reason. He didn't have any claim of self-defense. He just wanted to take the Ukrainian territories and killing thousands and hundreds of thousands of people. And do you treat him in your criticism as you treat Israel in your eyes, in your view?
I don't even know how to respond to a question like that. He invaded Ukraine for no reason? Do people start wars for no reason? Do you believe that?
Do you think that he had a reason of self-defense to invade Ukraine?
Well, of course I think that.
Yes? Do you think that Ukraine was a threat to the Russia? Wanted Russia elimination?
I mean, I've spent 4 years talking about this. I can summarize my view in 2 sentences. Maybe you won't agree with me, but my view has remained pretty consistent from the day that it started in the 4.5 years ago. And that is that the Biden administration sent the vice president, Kamala Harris, to the Munich Security Conference in February of 2022. And she said to President Zelensky at a news conference, we would like Ukraine to join NATO. That would mean nuclear weapons on Russia's western border with Ukraine. Mm-hmm. Now, you should know as an Israeli that that is a threat. that is an existential threat. If, for example, Iran were to place nuclear weapons in southern Lebanon, I think Israel would see that as the justification for a war in southern Lebanon.
That, again, is classic Tucker Carlson. We get the cringy laugh, we get the manipulation of facts, and we get the most bizarre justification that I've heard of Russia's attack on Ukraine. Really? Justified for self-defense? Never mind Russia's 2014 occupation of Crimea. That too, I suppose, was justified for self-defense. They invaded because it was there and because they said it was theirs. Okay, let's move on. I want to move on just, Udi, to a couple of other issues that I thought really certainly impacted me as I was watching it. I want you to know I spent far too much time last night.
I'm sorry.
Over
I really
this.
apologize
But it was
that I gave you so much Tucker Carlson time.
It was really interesting. And then from there, I moved on, to my light bedtime reading.
And this is the answer for your question. It was interesting. This is what we do in the news. I have to tell you that, okay? We are not the officers of good vibes in Israel, and we're not the voice of the government. We're not threatening ourselves or the government or other states. We need to make it interesting and worth a while and to create discussion. And we are not repairing the situation, but we need to at least reflect it with fairness. And I think that's what we did. Maybe I'm wrong, and I'm always open to hear if I was wrong also.
You did a great job. I think you did a great job, and that's why we're sitting here talking about it. And just to make you feel better, in case you're concerned that I kind of, was like all zenned out after watching it. I wasn't. I was worked up, and you got me thinking a lot, which is why we're doing this today. And again, appreciate you doing this on such short notice. There was the issue of why America found itself in this war on February 28th. Now, Tucker conveniently didn't address June, the first time that the U.S. went in and bombed Iran and knocked out a lot of its nuclear kind of resources. But Feb 28th, we were very focused on the second war. And he said, it's not about America. Again, like a broken record. Why am I paying for it? It has nothing to do with America. But here's why America is in the war, Tucker said. And he repeatedly said, and this is a fact. And what's the fact? He presented as fact that all of Trump's intelligence advice and military advice was against participating in the war with Iran. Now, number one, Tucker doesn't have clearance, okay? So if he does actually have that information, that's a much more serious issue that I'll leave to the American officials to deal with. Okay? But Tucker says it's a fact. I know it. I'm going to go crazy here, and I'm going to suggest that Tucker is relying exclusively on an article that appeared in the New York Times, and it was by two very good reporters, New York Times reporters, Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan, in which they presented, based on their sources, what I would call a theory or a possibility. And what they presented was this, that Trump and his team were kind of undecided, that Prime Minister Netanyahu made a quick trip to Washington, D.C. shortly before the 28th. They were in the Situation Room, that Netanyahu and other top officials were with him, that David Barnea and others were on the screen behind. And there was a robust discussion for several hours about what to do, what, if any, threat Iran presented, not just to Israel, also to Europe and America. There was discussion about the realistic possibility or not of regime change. There was discussion about what they knew with respect to Iran's ballistic missile reach. We now know for a fact that they can reach into and hit Europe. We don't know whether or not they have the capability yet to hit America. But again, this goes to the, are we, America, part of the larger world? Is it in America's interest to contain and restrain Iran's military capabilities? And again, this is not just a matter of, some bilateral thing between Iran and Israel. This engages the interests and stability of the Gulf countries, which are aligned with America. This also engages restraint of China and Russia, which are both very powerful countries and are making very strong and aggressive economic moves throughout the world. This is, an arm wrestle on a much bigger scale. But Tucker reduces it to this. Nope. They sat there with Benjamin Netanyahu, and he basically lied, and he told them regime change was possible and that America was threatened militarily. And Trump and his advisors were all so weak, as you pointed out very effectively, that they just caved.
Right.
That's Tucker's theory. He presents it as fact. We don't know that, and we won't know that until the archives are open in 50 years, what really went down. That is a fact. But here's the other thing he did that you drew out so well, and this is one of the most sinister aspects of what's going on in the world today. He said, I don't know what influences Donald Trump. I don't know what caused him to veer off his promise. He said during the campaign when I backed him, no wars, no foreign wars. But you know what? That Miriam Adelson, she's Jewish, and she has a lot of money. And she gave hundreds of millions of dollars to President Trump. I'm just asking the question.
Yes, this is his practice. I'm just asking questions.
But you really nailed that. And here's another question in the list of, I wish you'd asked. There are other very large donors to Trump's campaign who aren't Jewish.
Yes.
And, I wish you'd had the names there. But he chose to say, I don't know what changed. But what I do know is Miriam Adelson gave hundreds of millions of dollars.
And that's why I said to him that when we hear him, he's echoing the same pattern and narrative of the Elder of Zion and all these horrible anti-Semitic tales about the hidden power of the Jewish, that they control the world. So he said, no, I'm not an anti-Semite. And of course,
some of my best friends are
Jewish, which is like we know this drill.
In recent days, I have watched too many hours of Tucker Carlson delivering what he refers to as soliloquies. I'd characterize them as moderately unhinged rants. Tucker Carlson is no Shakespeare, but he is skilled at stitching together selective facts and innuendo to create a narrative. And his narrative goes something like this. I am American. I love America. America's interests must always prevail. America first. It is not ever in America's interest to become involved in foreign wars because I said so. America under Trump is beholden to a small group of Jews. I'm still in Tucker character, by the way. Wait, I didn't mean that. America is beholden to people who happen to be Jews, who have piles of money, and who have effectively bought control of the White House and, therefore, America. These people, I have no problem with Jews. I'm not even going to try to do his horrible laugh. I have no problem with Jews, except when, like Miriam Adelson, they bud in line at church and act as if they own the place. He actually says that. She's Israeli, But anyway, I digress. I am an America First isolationist. I do not believe that America should become involved in any wars or military action unless it is in America's national interest to do so. And our involvement in Iran and the Middle East is most definitely not in our national interest and has come about due to the control and manipulation of President Trump by corrupt billionaires who happen to be Jews. To which country are they loyal? Do they prioritize the interests of Israel or America? Okay, now I'm stepping out of Tucker character and I'm back in Viv mode. Tucker's knowledge of Middle Eastern geopolitics is porous at best. Or possibly, I'm just asking questions, he has his own agenda and promotes it by a very selective culling of facts which support his preferred narrative. In his strident opposition to any and all things involving Israel, he seems to discount any possibility that in certain cases, like Iran, the interests of America and Israel may converge. Not totally, but if one was to draw a Venn diagram, there would be some overlap. I'm not American, but I'm going to go crazy here and suggest that the regime that rules the Islamic Republic of Iran and has done so for the last 47 years, that supports global terror organizations like Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and others, which brutally represses its own people, which finances and executes terror attacks throughout the world, which regularly stages demonstrations where crowds are worked up and stomp on American flags and shout, "Death to America." I'm going to suggest that there most definitely is an American national interest in addressing that hostile regime. Tucker says, why? They can't harm us. And I say, well, Tuck, they are harming you. Open your eyes. Global commerce is a system in which we are all linked. Exhibit A, the Strait of Hormuz. Iran treats it as its sovereign territory. It is not Iranian sovereign territory. It is an international waterway. Take, so many terror attacks around the world in past decades with hard evidence of Iranian financing and operational support. Do you really believe America is immune, Tucker? Do you really believe that America is only targeted by Iran and its proxies because of Israel? Rich Jews? When, I ask, does the conduct of Iran begin to impact America's national interest? Tell me, Tucker, when their ballistic missiles can reach your country physically? How about when Iran attacks and threatens American allies? Forget Israel, because you clearly have problems with Israel. But how about, their ongoing support of Hezbollah for decades, destabilizing Lebanon, their attacks on the UAE, Bahrain, Qatar? What about those allies? What about Cyprus? We know now, because Iran proved it and has told us, that their ballistic missiles can reach Europe. Any allies there? Any American national interest in ensuring that Europe is sort of, stable? Tucker Carlson is all over the place. And what we will demonstrate in this podcast, with Tucker speaking for himself, is that he has a rather frenetic and not terribly linear thought process. His ideas and conclusions seem to be motivated by something other than logic or facts. But then, as Tucker likes to say, hey, I'm just raising and asking questions. He is obsessed with Miriam Adelson, Paul Singer. Now and then, he mentions Henry Paulson, former chair of Goldman Sachs. He refers constantly to AIPAC, the pro-Israel lobby group, as well as the Republican Jewish coalition, as if they are the only political lobby and interest groups in America. Far from it. Tucker never mentions Qatar or any other country, and there are many, that outspend and outlobby AIPAC and the RJC. Fact, as Tucker likes to say. There is nothing subtle about his message. He feigns offense when people suggest that he may be anti-Semitic. Some of his best friends, after all, are Jews. Tucker's approach is very, very skilled and slick. It's more refined than what many propagandists spew, but no less sinister. He is obsessed with rich Jews and how they are profiting from, everything bad. And he is not at all subtle about suggesting that the Jews are fomenting this instability. In this short segment with another superstar of the Israel is effing us over camp, Megyn Kelly, Tucker throws in a gratuitous shot at hedge fund manager Bill Ackman. Yep, he's Jewish. Yep, he's a billionaire. And yes, he's a Trump supporter. And Carlson very clearly suggests that Ackman will, profit from the mayhem this whole Israel war thing has led to.
On Inauguration Day, I got up really early and I went to church with Trump and Charlie Kirk. I sat with Charlie Kirk right behind Trump in church. And I had and I said my prayers, and I had a lot of thoughts about what this new world was going to look like. And all of them were wrong. So it's so important to remember that we're just not good at predicting the future. We imagine like this is going to happen in November in the midterms. Maybe not. Like, we don't really know. I do believe it's clear that volatility is coming for sure, and there's going to be a lot of change, and it doesn't mean everyone's going to get hurt. Some people will thrive in the middle of it. Bill Ackman will be just fine. He'll be richer than ever. We know that. But a lot of us will be fine too. But some people are going to get hurt. I just feel that really strongly, and I feel really sad about it. And I just hope that we can keep our heads one way or the other. And just remember that Trump turns 80 next month, and I hope he has a great birthday. I don't wish Trump ill. I never will wish Trump ill. I always have a gut level affection for Trump. That will never change. However, he will be gone relatively soon, and we'll still have this country. And after 10 years of thinking and talking about him all day, every day, I just wonder if we're prepared for what that's going to look like.
Here's another one of Tucker Carlson's recent pearls of wisdom, when he alleges that Prime Minister Netanyahu holds Trump hostage. His term, not mine. That Netanyahu totally controls Trump. Ergo, that Israel and the Jews control America. This excerpt is from a lengthy two-part interview done with Carlson by the New York Times.
You said he's a hostage just now. You told the BBC he's a slave to foreign interests.
Correct.
So I just want to ask you to be sort of explicit. I mean, Trump is being held hostage by whom? Or
by
who?
Benjamin
Or by
Netanyahu and by his many advocates in the United States. And we know that not simply because Trump started the war on February 28th, but because he couldn't get out of it. He declares we're having a ceasefire. This was 4 weeks in. He says we're having a ceasefire and we're having these talks and they're going great and we're going to open the strait. And Iran says, yeah, one of our conditions is Israel's got to pull back from southern Lebanon. You can't use the Iran war as a pretext for stealing more land from a sovereign country. That's not your country. Like, no. And it's not just Iran who felt that way. I think the rest of the world's like, what are you doing? I thought we were, fighting the great existential threat, Iran, and now you're taking the opportunity to take Lebanon shore of the Litani River and bombing downtown Beirut. Like, what is this? Anyway, this was all very well known. And within hours of announcing this, Trump announcing this, Israel publicly, in a way that was designed to get the attention of everyone, including the Iranians, starts killing civilians in Lebanon. Now, what was the point of that? Not to secure the Israeli homeland. The point of that was to end any talk of a negotiated settlement, to keep this going until Iran was destroyed and chaotic, which is the Israeli goal. I'm not attacking Israel by saying that. Their goals are different from ours. They're a different country.
Yeah, they would argue, of course, that what they are doing is neutralizing the threat that has been persistent in Lebanon through Hezbollah.
Oh, okay. But, I mean, they invaded Lebanon in 1982. Okay, so that was 44 years ago. They've had a lot of experience in Lebanon, a lot. They've had a lot of time to fix Lebanon. They killed Nasrallah. They blew up Hezbollah with explosive pagers. Like, they've done a lot since October 7th in Lebanon. They chose that moment to derail the negotiations. And they've done this repeatedly. And so my perspective as an American is, look, we're the United States. We're a country of 350 million people. You are wholly dependent on us. You're a country of 9 million people with no natural resources. I'm not against you, but like, we're not co-equals here. But the point I'm making is Trump could not restrain Netanyahu. Netanyahu is the one person Trump could not say, hey, settle down, or we'll just defund you and your country will collapse in about 10 minutes, which is true. Israel can't defend itself without the United States, despite whatever propaganda you may have heard. So again, it's not an attack on Israel. It's an attack on American leadership for not constraining its partner in a way that helps the United States. Trump said, I want a negotiated settlement. Israel stopped the settlement. Trump refused to even criticize Netanyahu in public. Are you joking? That's slavery. That is total control of one man by another. And it's, that's between Trump and Bibi and God, as far as I'm concerned. But as an American, that's our president, our elected president, whose job is to protect our country and our interests and our economy. And he is looking out for Israel first. That's outrageous. And no amount of like, oh, you're an anti-Semite, which I'm not, and I'm never going to be, is going to stop me from noting that that's outrageous. It is outrageous.
Or here, where Tucker tells Megyn Kelly that Prime Minister Netanyahu seems to have bewitched some of his American supporters, like U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee.
And what people like Levin, whom I'm not attacking, I feel sorry for because he's clearly living in hell, but what they're trying to do is a species of witchcraft. And it's really simple. You repeat something until it becomes true. You speak, you create truth by speaking. In the beginning was the word, right? There's a holy power, there's a supernatural power in words. Describing things is different from simply doing them. And if you can talk reality into being. This is what an incantation is. It's what a spell is. It's not like spooky, like crazy stuff. It's the lived reality of every person. Say it and it becomes true. And that's exactly what they're trying to do. Shills like Pompeo who are getting paid from who knows how many different groups to lie to you and coming across as some sort of moral voice, or poor Mike Huckabee, guys like that who are just like under some spell. Let's just be honest about what this is. It's not about Iran's weapons. It's about Israel's ambitions. But there's something deeper. There's like almost a spell. I mean, Huckabee, for example. You really think Huckabee is being threatened? I know Huckabee well. I'm sure you do too.
Yes.
Nice man. Like, what is this? And I look at him and I see a man under a spell. I mean this, and I'll be mocked for it, but I mean it. There's no practical, conventional explanation for some of this behavior. I mean, I look at Ted Cruz and I'm like, I think I know what's going on. Lindsey Graham, I think I know what's going on. But Mike Huckabee, I think he is under a spell. He is not thinking clearly at all. And so when Mike Huckabee says, and I think Mike Huckabee likes America or did, but when he stands up and says, God will destroy our country if we don't support Bibi, it's like, how could someone ever say something like that? And I don't know the answer, but I think it's more metaphysical than political.
I'm not cherry picking. The internet is full of this stuff. Among them, lots of discussions with Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson, bravely exposing the Jewish hold on America, how the Jews in Israel have effectively taken control of, well, kind of everything. This is what Udi Segel wants Israelis to know. And he's right.
But I have to pinpoint you to another thing that I think is one of my conclusions from the conversation with Tucker Carlson. What catch me was the fact that Tucker Carlson is doing all this echoing anti-Semitism and targeting Israel and targeting Jews and targeting the fact that as if we are controlling the Trump administration, and he get away with it. It's not something he's shameful of, okay? And it wasn't that like 5 or 10 years ago. 5 or 10 years ago, if you misspoke about ethnic group like the Jews or others, you were paying price for it. And it's something that is okay. It's his own opinion. He can say it. He can ask questions about the Jewish influence, and it's not something that is considered poisoning anymore. And this is something we need to watch, learn, and to get ourselves to tackle that. Because it's not only hasbara, how we explain ourselves. This is a policy matter. And Tucker Carlson, in the long interview, he quoted me, Bezalel Smotrich, and Itamar Ben-Gvir as people that spoke loudly, openly about ethnic cleansing. They said it. So how can I explain someone like Tucker Carlson? You know, they are minister in the government and they're speaking this nonsense, but this is not exactly the policy. And the army is not doing ethnic cleansing because Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir in broken English said so. I can explain it to you because you live in Israel and you can understand what I'm saying, but it's not going to the throat of other peoples outside Israel. And we need to understand it. How much those bragging about assassination, about ethnic cleansing, about killing all Hamas, destructing all of Gaza, all these things. What effect it has with people like Tucker Carlson, who are part of our problems. I wouldn't say enemies,
Right.
but they're giving a voice to our enemies. And he's magnifying the voice of our enemies. And we need to hear that from him, to listen, to get annoyed, and to act.
Absolutely, totally agree with you. I will add this, that you really pounded on the double standard in so many different contexts during the interview, and again, very effectively done. Having said that, you know, you also invoke here political correctness and sensitivity and all of this DEI that's been shoved down our throat now for, you know, almost 2 decades. But the one exception is Jews and Israel. And that's not on Tucker Carlson. That's a much bigger issue. He's part of it. He's jumping on the bandwagon. But it's okay to single out Jews as the greatest, most pernicious evil force in the world. And I'm not exaggerating. What Tucker Carlson says, alleges about Israel and about Jews, he would not dare say about Qatar, Iran, Russia, China, North Korea. I could go on. Equatorial Guinea, that's one of my favorites. He would not dare, nor, since we're separating the country from the people, would he do that with Catholics, Hindus, Buddhists, nor would he do that with Russians residing in America, Chinese people residing in America. So there's always this special license, this understanding that it's okay, they're just Jews, right? I mean, it's just Israel. So we can kind of say, and like, none of the rules, none of the sensitivities apply when it comes to Jews and Israel. And like you, and as you said in your interview, I'm not asking for a free pass. I'm just asking for a level playing field. We don't have time to get into everything. You took him on about his claims regarding genocide in Gaza, which are completely disingenuous. You took him on for fun. I hope you had fun about his behavior at the airport,
Right.
which was just appalling, bad manners. But in the end, Udi, I think that you did something really important. I thank you for it. You certainly got me going.
You're right.
And that means that you probably hit the nerve with quite a lot of people out there. Because I'm not an easy one to, you know, rile up.
I know that. And the most important thing, it will be interesting. And I hope that also our conversation will interest your audience, Vivian. And thank you very much for having me.
I know it will. Thank you so much
Sure.
for doing this. Have a good day.
Thanks.
So we'll close with this, which is kind of, you know, positive. Even Udi Segel and Tucker Carlson managed to wrap up on a positive note, agreeing on the desirability of living in a democracy. Watch this.
And so I hope we have an option. I would like a democracy in the United States, like I'd like one in Israel. Israel's not a democracy. The United States apparently is not a democracy either. Our government keeps doing things that people don't want. So that's not democracy. It's the opposite of democracy. And I want democracy very, very much.
I want democracy too. So here's at least one point that we totally agree. Mr. Carlson, thank you very much for this interview. Thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
See ya.
I think that's enough of Tucker Carlson for today. And before I go, I just want to share with you that this issue of who to platform, whether, how, I did a 3-part series on this in June, almost exactly a year ago, after a particularly nasty few weeks on Piers Morgan's show Uncensored, where his attacks on Israel and his bias against the country were so painfully evident. I've put the links to those episodes in the show notes, and they feature interviews with several guests who had been treated appallingly by Piers Morgan, as well as others who refused to appear on his show, and they explain why. Thanks as always for being here. And if there's anything in particular that you'd like State of Tel Aviv and beyond to cover, talk about, write about, send me a note. Vivian at stateoftelaviv.com. Until next time, stay safe. We love hearing from you, so please comment on our website, stateoftelaviv.com, or send us a note to vivian@stateoftelaviv.com. That's VIVIAN@stateoftelaviv.com. And if you go to our website, stateoftelaviv.com, you can find the subscribe button and take it from there. Hope that you do that. On behalf of the State of Tel Aviv core team, Jan Zabo, our creative, graphic, visual, and marketing man, Amir White, producer and editor extraordinaire, sound guy, who is also impressively patient with me and my boomer tech deficiencies, and our social media manager who pitches in on everything. Thank you, Maya Naftalin. Thanks to the team, and thank you, listeners, for being here. Until next time, stay safe.